Good morning. Jim Dandy O'Kelly here once again, exposing medical myths one at a time. I got another CD I did in 2012, primarily for new people, but for some of you oldsters too. It's 42 minutes long, so unless you have time, you want to come back to it when you do have time to listen to the whole thing because it's dynamite. What I do, I expose the medical myths one at a time. The mitochondria myth, the definition of inoculation, vaccination, and immunization myth. Isopathy explained. Herd immunity and virus shedding myths. I mentioned vitamins, but this was before I found out they were all synthetic, so you can ignore that. Tell the story of a government doctor who says how you catch a cold. You won't believe this. Titer test myth. What a fixed virus is. Antibody myths exposed, and a lot more. So let me turn this thing on. It's 42 minutes, and I'll get back to you when it's over. Hi, my name is Jim O'Kelly. I am the founder of the New Anti-Vaccination League of America. I've been into the vaccination research and study for a little over 40 years now. See you later. I also founded the No Shots, No School, Not True movement some years ago. But I put this CD together to give you some information that you're not going to get out of PubMed or the CDC. I've gone further and deeper than that. I went into the exact scientists, ones who created all the vaccines in the first place, where you get the real truth and not the news media propaganda that we've all been brainwashed with. And we've all been told about particles, nanoparticles. Well, nano means smaller than a particle, and a particle you can't see anyway unless you have an electron microscope, and you have to know what it is, a particle of what. But this goes back to a guy by the name of Albert Claude. And back in 1909, Claude laid the groundwork for modern cell biology with his 1945 publication of the first diagram of cell structure. After he got his medical degree, he used the mechanisms from meat grinders to construct a crude but high-speed centrifuge, and he pioneered ultracentrifugation, a technique for breaking and spinning infected cells to isolate their agents. You see, prior to his research, cell interiors were thought to be just a chaotic mass of substance. But his research showed the cell interior are actually well-organized area. Can you imagine that? But he discovered and named the endoplasmic reticulum, which I guess is derived from Latin, it means fishnet. And this is a membranous network within the cell. And he was the first, he was among the first scientists to use an electron microscope for cellular study. What he actually did was filtered out the cell membranes and placed the remaining cell contents in a centrifuge to separate them according to mass. He divided the centrifuge contents into factions and discovered that particular factions were responsible for particular cell functions. He is in fact credited to be the first to identify the mitochondria as a powerhouse of the cell. Now, if we analyze what's going on instead of like when we're in school and we're young and we memorize stuff and we don't think about it and we just go along with the program, and that's how we all get brainwashed when we're young. But if you stop and analyze what he did, he took a cell or a group of cells, fact. He crushed them all up, fact. He put them in a centrifuge and he separated the solid from the liquid just like your washing machine does, fact. Then he took that mess and he put it underneath an electron microscope, which only sees dead things, fact. But then He described the function of a particle as being the powerhouse of life, the mitochondria. Are you kidding me? Take a bunch of peas, smash them all up, centrifuge them, put them into a machine, separate them, put them under an electron microscope, pick out a particle, and say, oh, that's the particle that caused the life force of the pea to grow. This is absurd, folks, and you need to understand this is what your modern medicine is based upon. Absolute stupidity. I've always said that the medical profession was founded in ignorance and remains there today. And this is one example. We're going to get into more parts for you, more things that you probably are not going to be aware of that'll make a whole new argument platter for you to take on these pro-vax people. On this one, let's get down to one of the first, the real vaccination that took place back with Edward Jenner in the 1700s, 1800s. But let me first of all point out something to you. The word vaccination and immunization are used, inoculation is used quite interchangeably today. These people are so stupid they don't even know the history of vaccination. First of all, inoculation was when they took the pus from the arm of a person with smallpox and they injected it into a healthy person. That was direct arm to arm. That was outlawed in 1840 in England because so many people died from it. Then Jenner came along and he took the pus from a person and he stuck it into the cow's belly, took the cow pus and put that into a healthy person. That was vaccination, back up from the Latin meaning cow. The word immunization is a joke. You don't put poison in your body to immunize or make yourself healthy. So we don't even need to count that. So what are they really doing? If you think about what they did with Jenner, they took the pus from a person. That's the result of his disease. The pus was the result, not the cause. And then they said that putting that result of disease into a body would prevent disease. That is called isopathy. It was coined in 1823 by Dr. Lux, Joseph Lux. You can look that up. This idiot actually taught that the product of disease would prevent disease. And he also said it was the cause of itself. I mean, you want to talk about a science that is so based on screwed up thinking. You know, I don't even know how to classify this stuff. But here's what happened. We're going to put this in today's perspective and give you a light example that you can easily understand the silliness, the stupidity that Jenner did and those who followed him. So let's say that you are a person who takes care of your health, you eat right, you exercise, your body is healthy and your complexion is clear. But thinking like Edward Jenner, you perform an experiment on yourself. You eat junk for, say, 30 days. You eat lots of fried foods. You wash that food down with plenty of good, nourishing pop. Then you top off your nutritious meal with lots of sweets, cakes, pies, candy, etc. So if you don't die before the 30 days, you develop a severe case of pimples, the kind that form all that nasty pus. So let me ask you a question. Did the pimples cause themselves? Did the pus cause itself? No, they were the result of the cause. And any intelligent 10-year-old will tell you that the cause was the vitamin and mineral deficient food that caused those pimples. And the pimples pus was the result of the body trying to save itself by the process of eliminating that poison. So we now know the cause and the effect of eating food that poison the system. It's the same type of cause of smallpox. In the 1700s, a combination of filth and spoiled or scarcity of food. Now, pretend that you are that genius Edward Jenner, and you take the pus from the pimple and you inject it into a healthy person and declare that they are now prevented from catching pimpleitis. I just made that up, inflammation of the pimple. So now here's the best part. If you don't break out in pimpleitis, you're told that the reason is because of the virus poison that was injected into you. That prevented you from getting it. But if you do break out in pimpleitis, why, the germ was already there, the virus was already there, the ghost, whatever was already inside of you was doing its nasty work. And that, my friends, is the whole ignorant beginning, theory, conclusion of modern medicine that led us to stick 50 vaccine poisons into our children by the time they are 6 years old. It is also the foundation of catching a disease which was never caught. As I have said many times, the medical profession was founded in ignorance, deception, and lies, and it remains there today. And as the late Dr. Herbert Shelton said, let us have the truth, though the heavens may fall. And on this CD, you're going to get all the truth. So, let's take on this idea that the unvaccinated are the problem in causing illness. Really? Here's a typical statement by these pro-vax morons. Parents are angry that unvaccinated children have put their children at risk. Well, let's use a bit of logic and common sense that the pro-vax person does not seem to have. The claim is made that a vaccine will protect one from catching a particular disease germ. So if a vaccine will protect you from catching germs that cause disease, why would a vaccinated person be concerned about an unvaccinated person? According to this, all vaccinated people are protected. That means that the only people who would be a threat are unvaccinated people who would catch disease germs from another unvaccinated person. So if vaccines really protected the vaccinated person from catching a disease germ, there should be absolutely no fear by the vaccinated. Well, and now these morons are coming out saying that, well, sometimes it doesn't work. Excuse me, you're going to tell me it's a failure, but it's still a success, but you don't know when, why, where, or how? I mean, this is the stupidity of these people. But worse than that, they think that we're that stupid that we're going to buy it. And of course, we're not. So let's take on this herd immunity and virus shedding. Both are myths. And this foolish idea says, after enough people are vaccinated, those who aren't can hide in the herd, protected by those around them. Herd immunity is designed to protect those who cannot be vaccinated. Children benefit from herd immunity, the protection of all the vaccinated kids around them. The question of logic, one word, will put this nonsense to rest. How? The question is, how would this poison injected to one person protect another person? Now, here's some statements from the book Virus is the Smallest Enemy by David Locke, who is a pro-virus mouthpiece. And he says the virus is a tiny submicroscopic particle that is not really alive. A virus is composed of two substances, nucleic acid and protein. A virus is unable to function or multiply outside of living cells. A virus does not really draw nourishment from the host, just a simple collection of chemicals. It doesn't need any nourishment and doesn't reproduce in the way typical living creatures do either. So the virus is dependent on the host cell. It says, and as with many other difficult to answer questions, the problem here is more with the question than the answer. Ignorance about viruses is not the cause of the problem. Scientists knows exactly where viruses stand with respect to living things. They are living and they are not. It is the difficulty of defining living things that creates the problem. And this guy's talking about ignorance. Who's ignorant? It's hard to comment on these absurd statements. I don't have any trouble knowing that this keyboard is not alive. I can clearly see that my desk, my chair, my wall, my book, my metal in my car is not alive. Why would a scientist who's so educated have this problem? My guess would be that some are not too smart, and some know where the money is. Now you should understand why herd immunity is a myth, and living viruses that attack and cause human sickness is a myth. possibly a lie, and for sure an absurdity. But let's talk about the virus shedding. A virus will leave one body and attack another and cause a disease. So according to the book, a virus is a submicroscopic particle that's not alive, cannot multiply outside of a cell, doesn't eat, move, eliminate, or multiply, is just a collection of chemicals, but somehow it leaves the body and protects another body, or it can leave a body and attack another body. With no brain, this is absolutely amazing, the ridiculousness of these kind of statements. And it should be obvious that both statements are absurd. Herd immunity and virus shedding are both a myth. You know, after hearing this, you still believe it? Get a hold of me. I got some land in Florida to sell you. And I don't mean to cut you down, but I mean, when you've got the facts, you got to open up your mind. Now, the herd immunity is used by the vaccine promoters to promote their vaccines by telling people it protects them. Unfortunately, the anti-vaxxer throws out the virus shedding, trying to use it as a defense in saying that, well, you put that virus in that needle and it somehow goes out and gets on somebody else and causes them to get sick. The problem is you're keeping the virus myth alive when you tell people that. You need to understand that both are wrong. And you can deal with that, and then you'll have a better understanding of how to attack these people with their stupidity. So both are a myth, because the virus, if you stop to think about it, is a liquid in a needle stuck in a body. Look at your body. How's this stuff going to get out of you and go and attack somebody else? And when you get those superfluous answers about, well, it comes out in the stool, how many people are around somebody else's stool? They sneeze it out. Well, they sneeze what out? The liquid? I mean, stop and think what's going on. Get the facts, use your common sense and logic, and the pro-vaxxer won't hold a candle to your arguments. So as long as we're talking about viruses, I want to give you one example, and I have many, many books on this, of how this idea that a virus caused colds and other diseases. It's hard to believe when you read this, you're going to think it's absurd because it is, but it's hard to believe that the moms of this book believed this stuff, or maybe they didn't and it took 50 years to promote this concept. But this is from the Mother's Encyclopedia. It was from the Parents Institute, the same people who do Parents Magazine today, and it was a chapter called Colds. It was written in 1942, and the author was Dorothy Whipple, medical doctor. She was a medical officer, Division of Research and Child Development, Children's Bureau in Washington. And you might think, yeah, the government's involved, and they were. But listen to what she says. So far, medical science has been unable to answer the question, how can we rid the land of the common cold? Although the final answer has not yet been written, a number of facts about the cold have been established. And the word established, by the way, means made up. And she's now going to say these are facts. Get ready. Quote, the common cold is an acute, communicable disease caused by the growth of a specific germ in the nose or throat. As yet, the germ that causes colds has never been seen or isolated. It belongs to a group of organisms that are so small they cannot be seen even under the most powerful microscope, small enough to pass right through very finely messed porcelain filters that hold back ordinary germs. Disease-producing agents of this class are called filterable viruses. The fact that they cannot be seen, that they cannot be prepared with certainty in the laboratory, makes research difficult. Yeah, I'll bet. Nevertheless, it has now been established that a living agent exists. I'm going to read that again. It has now been established that a living agent exists, belonging to the class of filterable viruses that is capable of producing this disease. And I'm going to interject for a minute because I'm going to tell you what a filterable virus was. The word virus was filterable viruses in the 1800s. And they took a tobacco leaf, they ground it up into liquid, and they ran it through a filter looking for germs that they thought caused the disease of this plant. And of course they found them. But after a while, when everybody knew the term filterable viruses, they dropped filterable and they just talked about viruses. And the guys from the crooked virologist just started saying that this was a thing that caused human disease. Anyway, it says it is also established that the presence of this disease agent is necessary for the development of a cold. A true cold never develops unless the virus is present. She goes on to say why we get colds. We get colds because we come in contact with the virus. Under the careful conditions of the laboratory, the common cold has always been produced in a susceptible person whenever some of the virus of the cold was placed in the mucous membrane of the nose or throat. The virus is thus the primary cause of the common cold. Without the virus, there can be no cold. Conditions that favor colds. Before a cold can develop, the virus must be present. The virus is the primary cause of the disease. Without it, there can be no cold. The virus will remain alive for hours. Many colds are spread by kissing. Man, are you kidding me? This was put out to thousands and thousands of mothers back in 1942 and has been promoted ever since, telling you that they've never seen this virus. Ever. Doesn't even know it exists, but you can't get a cold unless you've got the virus. And that you get it by kissing. Why isn't everybody sick? I mean, this is just too absurd to believe. But this is the beginning of just one of the liars, the deceivers, who have had an understanding of human nature that if you tell a lie long enough and enough times, it will be believed. Now let's take on the cause of smallpox. The only way you're going to know the truth, to separate it from the nonsense of today, is to go back to the original scientists, the original doctors who were there treating those cases and understood what the cause was. Now, I have a book, it was written in 1792 by a doctor, a very famous doctor at that time. One of the best books I've ever read. Talks about all diseases and conditions of the filth that people lived in. But here's what he said in his chapter on smallpox. Because, you know, smallpox, these modern doctors for the last 50 years or 100 years have only seen pictures. They wouldn't even know what a smallpox was if they saw it. They have no clue. But here's what he said the cause is. Quote, children are most liable to this disease, and those whose food is unwholesome, who want proper exercise, and abound with gross humors, run the greatest hazard from it. Now, you hear what he's saying? Children who are malnourished, sickly, are the ones that got the smallpox. You don't have to catch anything to have a sick system, and that's just another condition of the body eliminating poison out of the body. And by the way, this book is full of the words virus. And they weren't talking about anything living. They were talking about the pus in the arm that Jenner used to make a vaccine of. Then he says, nothing more certainly relieves the patient or is more beneficial in the smallpox than a plentiful discharge of urine. During the rising of the smallpox, it frequently happens that the patient is 8 or 10 days without a stool. This not only tends to heat and inflame the blood, but the feces, by lodging so long in the body, became acrid and even putrid, from whence bad consequences must ensue. Now here's a guy in 1792 that understand the urine, the body was eliminating the poison from the system, and that constipation was a problem. And that is a big problem with most people that are sick. Then he says, nature generally attempts to relieve the patient by loose stools. Her endeavors this way are by no means to be counteracted, but promoted, and the patient at the same time supported by food and drink of a nourishing and cordial nature. Now he had it right with the loose stools. You don't want to stop that diarrhea from happening. That's the body's way of eliminating it. But he was wrong about feeding that sick body while it was trying to eliminate poison. So that's okay. We'll still give him points. So let's analyze what happened. First of all, the children mostly getting this disease. Second, these children are sick and malnourished. This is obviously a disease caused by parents who didn't feed their children right or didn't have enough of the right kind of food. Then the doctor says that the body is attempting to eliminate the poison by plentiful discharge of urine. Also says kids are constipated, don't get much exercise. The doctor understands that the putrid feces is not good and will cause more problems. He then correctly says that the loose stools should not be stopped, but allowed to go on. Then he incorrectly says to feed the patient, and in putting it all together, we have children not being fed right, developing a toxic body, and being told to eat while the body is trying to get rid of the poison. No wonder so many children died during that period. When you know this, do you really think a germ is responsible for the children's toxic body? This is a 600-page book, by the way. The doctor had a good idea of the cause of disease, but was totally ignorant of the simple concept, we are what we eat. Now the next paragraph I'm throwing in because he describes the conditions of living in the 1700s, which he does in almost every chapter. It's a fascinating book, and I'll tell you, it was a Dr. William Bookman, B-U-C-H-A-N. You can even look him up. But here's what he says, quote, "In many great towns, the streets are little better than dunghills, being frequently covered with ashes, dung, and nastiness of every kind. Even slaughterhouses or killing animals are often to be seen in the very center of great towns. The putrid blood, excrements with all their places are generally covered, cannot fail to taint the air and render it unwholesome. We are sorry to say that the importance of cleanliness does not seem to be understood by the magistrates of most towns in Britain. The peasants in most countries seem to hold cleanliness in contempt. One seldom sees a farmhouse without a dunghill, and frequently the cattle lodged under the same roof. The whole book speaks of the filth and rottenness of the towns and the people. Yep, must have been that poor germ that was feeding on all that good germ food that caused a toxic condition called the smallpox." Now, you want to know what kind of a man Jenner was? I told you I have some old books. Got a lot of them. Got a magazine called the Analytic Magazine, January of 1817. I'm going to quote what Jenner wrote in a letter to his doctor friend. "In the midst of the trees is a small mansion built in a cottage style. It consists of only one room, and was erected for the purpose of giving a rural appearance to that part of my garden. I have lately converted it into a place of utility, and the people who come to be inoculated assemble there, and wait until I come among them. It is for this reason I have given my little cottage the name of the Temple of Vaccinium, and like a faithful priest," adding, he's smiling, "I am always anxious to find it filled with worshippers." Hey, those of you that are educated in abnormal psychology, I'm sure you got a right name for this guy. Okay, let's take on titer test, the technique for measuring the amount of antibody in the blood. Quote, "A New York virologist named George Hurst had discovered that certain viruses, that means poison, including those of flu, that means nasal discharge, caused red blood cells to clump or coagulate in a test tube. So all they had to do was add blood and look for clumps. Jonas Salk enlarged the idea. He showed that antibody titer, approximate concentration of antibody, of a blood sample could be calculated by adding virus to the sample and interpreting the clumps that formed. So let's analyze that. They took the virus, say the flu, which was nasal discharge, and they simply added that to blood. And if it clumped, they claimed there was an antibody in there and claimed this antibody was alive. Let's go on. John Enders had noticed that when red phenol was dropped into a living tissue culture, it turned yellow, the metabolic acids of the tissue having affected the color. But if virus were multiplying in the tissue and destroying it, less acid was present and the dye remained reddish. Salk suggested that the phenomenon could be put to more refined use. Salk's assistant, Julius Younger, developed a color test that not only demonstrated the presence of virus, but permitted close approximation of their number. Ranging shade by shade from red through orange to yellow, The color scale remains the most accurate method of titrating viruses. Let's use a little common sense. They're taking pus of some type and putting it into blood cells and clumping it and claiming they can actually count what? The clumps? I mean, this just gets worse as it goes on. But you notice nobody sees any antibodies. They're just mixing this virus poison with red blood cells. So what is the virus you're mixing with red blood cells? Here are a few actual vaccine recipes, which will tell you what the virus material is made from. Here we go. Quote, the vaccine was injected in the testicles of a rabbit. 4 days later, the testicles were removed and ground in a mortar bowl. The material was centrifuged and the fluid used as a vaccine. Now here's the source. You can look this up yourself. Google observations concerning the persistence of living cells in Maitland's medium for the cultivation of vaccine virus. This is by Thomas Rivers, one of the biggest liars and promoters of this living virus stuff. And that was in June 7th, 1929, page 182. Here's another one. The fixed lab made, which is what fixed virus means, of rabies was produced in rabbit brain, page 1. The virus used in this study had been cultivated in a medium containing the tissues of chick embryos, from which the head and spinal cord had been removed. The requisite concentration of virus for inoculation was obtained by utilizing the brains of mice, page 2. Infected chick embryos were ground up in a mortar with normal human serum and centrifuged, then passed through a filter and injected into the brains of mice. You know, these guys are sick. I'm telling you, they don't need to just go to jail. They need to go to the insane asylum. Here's the source. The use of yellow fever virus modified in vitro cultivation for human immunization, Max Steiler, March 18, 1937. And now, from the man who said he fed the first live virus to a human in his own words. You're going to love this one. Quote, adult cotton rats were injected into brains and spinal cords with suspensions of virus. The animals were killed and their brains and spinal cords were removed. This material was put in a wearing blender. The material was then put in glass bottles. The bottles were frozen and then thawed. The material was transferred onto a tablespoon and fed to the volunteers either directly or suspended in half glass of either chocolate milk or corn syrup. That's your living virus? Adult cotton rat brains? I mean, this guy is Hillary Kaprowski. He sent me his original paper on this thing because I had a little correspondence. He died about a year or so ago. It's too bad he didn't confess his sins before he died. But it's called Immune Responses in Human Volunteers upon Oral Administration of Rodent-Adapted Strain of Poliomyelitis Virus. So, let's summarize. They took ground up rabbit testicles, rabbit brain, rat brain, and spinal cord, mixed it with red blood cells. If the mixture clumped, that was supposed to mean that there were fighters called antibodies. Now you know why they don't see antibodies. They simply didn't exist. And when Jonas Salk and his people said they saw antibodies circulating in the bloodstream back in the days of their polio vaccine, they were lying out of their teeth. So, let's take on antibodies. We just talked about another fiction in the land of lies. I will now prove by fact and logic that antibodies, which are said to call in white blood cells to attack viruses, which also do not exist. Antibodies, by definition, by scientific definition, are classified as a protein. Proteins, by definition, are classified as molecules. And a molecule is, by definition, two or more atoms that stick together. So you take any one of those things, or all of them together, put them under the electron microscope, they see nothing alive. There's absolutely no such thing as an antibody. So I quote, proteins may be purified from other cellular components using a variety of techniques, such as ultracentrifugation, electrophoresis, if I pronounce that right, and chromatography. Chromatography is simply a separation of mixture. which is what they're doing, separating this poison from its solid and liquid parts with that centrifuge machine. Now, this electrophoresis is simply the movement of electrically charged particles in a fluid under the influence of electric field. And there it is. They use a centrifuge machine to separate the substance into particles and the electron microscope to visualize the particles. And all they do is name the particle and say it's alive. You don't have to understand all this medical mumbo-jumbo in order to understand there is nothing that is alive. The virologist can take any product or substance and centrifuge it into particles. So the next time you hear or read about particles, virus, you need to ask one question. What is the source of the material they're using? And how was it extracted? And finally, what instrument did they use to see it? And you'll find out it's the same with everything, the electron microscope. White blood cells? Absolutely. They're alive and they're scavengers. They clean up your body. Antibodies? Show me just one circulating in the bloodstream and attacking the so-called live virus. It will never happen because it has never happened. Because they just made it all up. It's part of that imaginary explanation stuff. All we, the anti-vaxxer, need is the facts and some common sense with a tad of logic to expose these myths promoted by the vaccine sellers. So I'll give you a clue about the so-called virus. By now you should know it doesn't exist. Virus is defined as poison, like in snake venom. The poison virus used to make vaccines is derived from the product of disease, like the pus from the arm of a person with smallpox. And you can guess what the virus poison is in making flu vaccine, as I think I said in another tape, nasal discharge. Yeah, if you said that, you're right. The last I read, the discharge snot, sorry to be so explicit, but this tends to stick in the mind better, shows how depraved these virologists really are. Material comes from pigs. Pigs are injected with other poisons that gives them the cold in the first place. Let me make a quote here from a guy you may remember in school. He said, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame and diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease." That was Thomas A. Edison. Pretty smart guy. But I guess old Tom never realized how the medical profession would be prostituted by the drug companies. And let's deal with another myth, lie, alibi, absurdity from our virologist friends. The virus latency. All this stupid stuff about this virus lying in your body for 20, 30, 40 years, and then all of a sudden coming alive and causing you to have the shingles. I mean, when you understand what I understand, you just shake your head at how they get away with this crazy stuff. But the absurd concept that ground up rat or rabbit brain can become alive. January of 1957, Jonas Salk wrote to Henry Crum, the National Foundation of Infantile Paralysis Director of Research, and he said the propensity of some microorganisms, quote virus, to remain in the body in a state of parasitic equilibrium for years at a time until something upsets the equilibrium and induces a flare-up. The best known examples are herpes simplex, the cold sore, but the phenomenon has been noticed in chickenpox, shingles, and central respiratory infections. So, a virus which is a poison somehow gets in the body and lies dormant until something upsets the equilibrium and induces a flare-up. Then it comes alive and causes a disease. And this is your modern science? Jonas Salk, who made vaccines out of monkey kidney, knew there was no such living thing as a living virus. He was an absolute liar when he promoted that vaccine in polio, and that's a whole other story. The same man, he perpetrated the polio massacre of 1955. Salk never looked for or found a living virus because he knew it didn't exist. He was promoting antibodies of which he never saw either. It was the greatest con game ever pulled off on the medical profession and the world. So now, let me close up with a couple more. I want to tell you what you're up against. Those of you people that go to doctors, and I hope you educate yourself enough to become your own doctor. And they're nice guys, they're nice ladies, but they're ignorant. They don't know what's going on. Here's what you're up against. This is taken from a book called The Facts Against Compulsory Vaccination in 1929. It was a declaration by Dr. John P. Kohler, Commissioner of Health of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in an article in the Wisconsin Medical Journal, November of 1925. Quote, since people cannot be vaccinated against their will, the biggest job of the health department has always been, and always will be, to persuade the unprotected people to get vaccinated. This we attempted to do in three ways. First, by education. Second, by fright. And third, by pressure. We dislike very much to mention fright and pressure, yet they accomplish more than education, because they work faster than education, which is normally a slow process. Have their tactics changed? Do you think these so-called outbreaks you hear about are real? Has there been an outbreak in your area? With this type of an attitude, do you think that the health departments of today believe in honesty? Is it not their goal to poison everybody in the world? Do you now understand when you talk to a doctor today and express your doubts, they become outraged? And if they're nice, maybe they just don't want to lose business and figure eventually you'll change your mind? Do you really think that these people are looking out for your child's best interest or yours? Educate before you medicate. And finally, from the book, The Poisoned Needle of 1957, it says a planned medical conspiracy. Quote, this medical stranglehold did not just happen with the passing of time. It was a planned conspiracy against the American people, with an eye to the financial gains of the doctors. A sample of this strategy may be seen in the following speech by Dr. W.A. Evans, one of the top medical bosses and health commissioner of the city of Chicago, who gave these instructions to the doctors in their annual convention of the American Medical Association in 1911. Quote, the thing for the medical profession to do is to get right into and man every important health movement. Man health departments, tuberculosis societies, housing societies, child care and infant societies, etc. The future of the profession depends on it. The profession cannot afford to have these places occupied by other than medical men. This pronouncement was published in the Journal of the AMA September 16, 1911. With the help of the drug and insurance companies and ignorant lawmakers, they have succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. I have learned the truth about the laws of health and the real cause of disease. What good did it do me? I fired my doctor over 50 years ago. I take no drugs, medications. I have never bought health insurance in my life, and I have no fear of their fear tactics, their lies, or their intimidation. I hope you listen to this over and over again until you completely understand this, because when you do, you too will fire your doctor. You will save your life, you will save the lives of your children, because people are now being made sick from the cradle to the grave with vaccines. It is a money-making industry, and they don't care how many people they have to kill as long as they can make their profits. Wise up, re-educate yourself, educate before you medicate, investigate before you vaccinate. And this is Jim O'Kelly, hoping that you will pass this message on. You'll make copies of this. Give it to those you love and care about. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Well, that was quite a mouthful, wasn't it? How many of you learned that in your science classes where you were programmed with the garbage that you believe? Well, this is a wake-up call for some, incredible for others. But for those of you who just want to educate yourself, you can watch my videos a few times. For those of you that want to educate others, like your school board, your board of ill health, your principal or superintendent, your doctor or your friends and relatives, you will need my book, The Anti-Vaccinator's Bible, which you can get on Amazon by typing in my name, Jim Dandy O'Kelly. It's very inexpensive. Jim Dandy out for now.